Welcome, welcome to Between Sleep and Science, to a quiet sanctuary of the mind. As the world outside begins to dim and the frantic pace of your day recedes into the shadows, we find ourselves at the threshold of a great mystery. It is a journey inward toward the 3-pound masterpiece of biological engineering that rests within the cradle of your skull. We are here to talk about the brain, not as a cold anatomical object, but as the tireless, silent conductor of a symphony that never stops playing. Imagine, for a moment, that you are simply a passenger in a vessel of incredible complexity. You don't have to remind your heart to beat. You don't have to calculate the precise volume of air required for your next breath. There is an ancient, rhythmic intelligence already taking care of it all, governing every flicker of emotion and every chemical pulse without ever asking for your permission. Before we descend into the intricate architecture of this biological marvel, let us settle into the present. Perhaps you are tucked under a warm blanket, or maybe you are listening through headphones as the evening air cools. Wherever you are, recognize that your brain is already at work, weaving the sounds of my voice into the fabric of your consciousness. It is a universe of quiet coordination, an electrical garden where instinct and intellect grow side by side. Have you ever paused to wonder how it feels to be the one doing the thinking, while simultaneously being the machine that makes thinking possible? The brain isn't just an organ you possess. It is the very essence of the you that is listening right now. For hundreds of millions of years, this system has been perfecting the art of control. Long before humanity developed language or art, the brain was already a master of survival. It operates through a system of systems, a layered hierarchy where each region has its own sacred duty. Deep at the base sits the brainstem, an ancient sentinel that watches over your vitals with relentless vigilance. Above it, the cerebellum acts like a master craftsman, polishing your movements until they reach the clarity of glass. And draped over everything is the cortex, that rippled landscape of awareness that allows you to dream of futures that haven't yet arrived. As you prepare for sleep, this control system is gently shifting gears. It is slowing your pulse, softening the tension in your shoulders, and easing the weight of your eyelids. It is the caretaker of your calm. But as we begin this exploration, a haunting question remains. If the brain is the one pulling every lever and orchestrating every cell, who is it that truly controls the brain? Is the inner narrator in your head the captain of the ship, or merely a late arrival who takes credit for the work done by silent networks deep below the surface? Let's dim the lights of your awareness just a little further and begin to unravel the threads of this magnificent hidden ruler. Imagine you are holding a porcelain mug. Suddenly, it slips. Before your conscious mind can even register the catastrophe, a surge of lightning-fast coordination takes over. Your arm lurches forward, your fingers splay in a desperate reach, and your entire posture shifts to maintain your center of gravity. You didn't plan this rescue. You didn't sit down to calculate the physics of the falling object. By the time you feel the rush of adrenaline and realize what happened, the crisis has already been managed. This is the beauty of the brain's hierarchy, a system that is both ancient and improvisational, designed to act first and file the paperwork later. Inside your skull, there is a chain of command more efficient than any human organization. At the very foundation is the brain stem, the lighthouse keeper of your biology. It doesn't care about your philosophy or your plans for tomorrow. Its only job is to keep the light turning. It manages the steady rhythm of your lungs and the pressure of your blood with a focus that never wavers, whether you are awake or in the deepest stages of REM sleep. It is the body's unspoken promise that life will continue even when you forget to pay attention. Just above this ancient base lies the cerebellum, often dismissed as the little brain, though it contains more neurons than the rest of the brain combined. Think of it as an invisible mathematician. Every time you walk across a room without stumbling, the cerebellum is running thousands of adjustments per second, predicting the consequences of every muscle twitch and correcting errors before they manifest. It prefers precision over applause. It is the reason you can reach for a glass in the dark and find it with uncanny accuracy. Deep within the core, we find the basal ganglia, the silent gatekeepers of your impulses. They sit in the shadows, filtering the thousands of wants that bubble up from your mind. If your cortex, the outer layer of thought, dreams of a movement, the basal ganglia decide if that dream is worth making real. They are the arbiters of habit and rhythm, the reason you can tie your shoes while thinking about something else entirely. Without them, your life would be a chaotic storm of conflicting urges. With them, you possess the grace of coordinated action. At the summit of this mountain sits the cerebral cortex, the rippled grey landscape that defines our humanity. This is the strategist, the poet, and the planner. It takes the raw, chaotic signals from the world and transforms them into language, art, and self-reflection. However, even this mighty king is dependent on its subordinates. Consider the thalamus, located like a grand central station at the brain center. It is the doorman of your consciousness. Every sight you see and every sound you hear must first pass through the thalamus, which decides what is important enough to reach your awareness and what should be cast into the void of the ignored. Together, these regions form a seamless loop of master and servant, ensuring that you can navigate a world of noise with purpose and poise. Have you ever experienced that strange, fleeting moment when you rise too quickly from your bed? For a split second, the world seems to tilt on its axis. Your vision narrows into a grey blur. A soft, rushing sound fills your ears, and you feel as though gravity itself might finally win the tug of war. But then, before you can even find the words to describe the dizzying sensation, your body rights itself. Your heart quickens its pace. Your blood pressure stabilizes, and the world snaps back into focus. You didn't do this through willpower. You didn't think your way back to balance. You were saved by a hidden network of automatic control known as the autonomic nervous system. This system is the silent conductor of your body's internal orchestra, operating 24 hours a day, entirely without your permission. It has been perfecting its craft since long before human consciousness even evolved. Think of it as a bridge between the ancient world of instinct and the modern world of thought. The autonomic network is divided into two main branches, each with a distinct and necessary personality, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic systems. They are the gas pedal and the brake of your biological existence. The sympathetic system is your internal alarm. Imagine a tiger leaping from the shadows. In an instant, this system floods your veins with adrenaline. It dilates your pupils to let in more light, redirects blood flow to your heavy muscles, and commands your heart to thunder in your chest. Every cell in your body is suddenly primed for a singular purpose: survival. But life cannot be lived in a constant state of high alert. This is why, once the perceived danger has passed, the parasympathetic system steps in like a wise, calming friend. It coaxes your heart to slow its frantic rhythm, deepens your breathing, and signals your digestive system to resume its work. It is the transition from fight or flight to rest and digest. At the heart of this vital operation lies a structure with a formidable name: the medulla oblongata. Tucked deep within the brainstem, it acts as the primary command center for your autonomic life. It constantly processes information from tiny, stretch-sensitive sensors called baroreceptors, which are embedded in the walls of your arteries near the heart and neck. Their job is elegantly simple, yet profound. They measure your blood pressure in real time. When you stand up suddenly, gravity pulls your blood toward your feet, momentarily starving the brain of its precious oxygen. Within milliseconds, the baroreceptors sense this drop and scream a warning to the medulla. The medulla, in turn, issues immediate corrective orders: constrict the vessels in the legs, pump the heart faster, and push the blood back upward. Flowing through this entire system is a nerve with a beautifully poetic name: the vagus nerve, from the Latin word for wandering. True to its name, it meanders from the brainstem down through the neck, touching nearly every major organ: the heart, the lungs, the gut. It is the primary carrier of the parasympathetic signal, the whispering line of reassurance. When the vagus nerve fires, it tells your body that you are safe. It is the mechanical foundation of peace. Interestingly, there is a quiet secret of physiology you can use right now. You can talk back to your nervous system through your breath. When you inhale, your heart rate naturally quickens. When you exhale, it slows. This is called respiratory sinus arrhythmia. By deliberately lengthening your exhalation, you are literally stimulating the vagus nerve, sending a manual override to your brain that says, "All is well." You are using the very circuits that keep you alive to usher in a state of tranquility. It is one of the quietest miracles of biology, a symphony of sensors and nerves working in perfect, unceasing rhythm to ensure that you remain upright, conscious, and calm. Somewhere deep within the folded landscape of your brain, a single neuron fires. It is a brief, almost insignificant flicker of electricity, lasting no more than 1,000th of a second. Yet, that solitary spark is the beginning of everything. It can trigger a memory of a childhood summer, cause a finger to twitch, or ignite a life-changing idea. The brain is not a static organ of flesh and blood. It is a living, breathing storm of signals, a vast electric forest where 86 billion trees are constantly whispering to one another in a language of voltage and timing. The story of this whisper begins with a delicate balance of chemistry. Every neuron in your head maintains an electrical charge across its membrane, much like a tiny battery waiting to be used. Inside the cell, there is a specific mix of potassium ions. Outside, a sea of sodium ions. This separation creates a state of tension known as the resting potential. It It is the quiet before the storm, the absolute stillness of a lake before a stone is dropped into its center. When a neuron receives enough nudges from its neighbors, chemical messages that signal it's time to act, it reaches a tipping point called the threshold. Once this threshold is crossed, the floodgates open. Sodium channels fling wide, and positively charged ions rush in, causing the voltage to shoot upward in a burst of energy called an action potential. This pulse races down the neuron's long, slender arm, the axon, like a wave of falling dominoes. But notice the discipline of this system. The neuron follows an all-or-nothing rule. It doesn't fire halfway. It either commits fully or remains silent. This ensures that the brain's communication remains clean, digital, and incredibly reliable, even amidst the biological noise of a living body. When the electrical pulse reaches the end of the line, it encounters a problem, a gap. This is the synapse, a microscopic canyon that separates one neuron from the next. Here, the language of electricity must be translated into the language of chemistry. The arrival of the spark triggers the release of neurotransmitters, small molecules stored in tiny bubbles. These messengers drift across the canyon and bind to receptors on the receiving cell, opening new channels and allowing the dance of ions to begin anew. This is where the true complexity of control emerges. Each synapse is a decision point. Some neurotransmitters are excitatory, urging the next neuron to join the chorus and fire. Others are inhibitory, whispering for the next cell to stay quiet and hold its peace. This balance between action and restraint is what keeps your brain stable. If every neuron fired at once, the result would be an internal cacophony of chaos. Inhibition is not a sign of weakness. It is what makes thought possible. It acts like the soft padding on a drum, shaping the rhythm and ensuring that the melody of your mind isn't lost in a sea of static. Perhaps the most miraculous part of this electrical dance is its ability to change. When two neurons repeatedly communicate, their connection grows stronger, a principle known as synaptic plasticity. As the saying goes, cells that fire together wire together. Every time you practice a skill or dwell on a thought, you are physically carving a path through this electrical forest, making it easier for the spark to travel that way again. Your brain is a self-rewriting map, a symphony that learns its own notes through repetition. As you listen to these words, millions of these tiny flickers are occurring within you, creating a tapestry of consciousness from nothing more than salt, water, and the hum of the body electric. Imagine a light tap just below your kneecap. Before your conscious mind can even register the sensation of the doctor's rubber mallet, your leg jerks forward in a sharp, involuntary kick. There was no planning involved, no weighing of options, and certainly no deliberate choice. This humble, automatic motion is the nervous system's signature move, fast, efficient, and gloriously indifferent to your opinion. These are your reflexes, the body's ancient shortcuts to survival, designed to handle danger or imbalance long before the slower, more analytical parts of your brain can catch up. The circuitry behind a reflex is almost absurdly simple, yet its power lies in that very simplicity. It operates on a tight loop of wiring that bypasses the high-level processing of the cerebral cortex. When a sensory neuron detects a sudden stretch or a sharp pain, like the sting of a hot stove, it fires a signal directly into the spinal cord. There, Instead of waiting for a managerial decision from the brain, it connects almost immediately to a motor neuron that sends an urgent command back to the muscle. In less than a tenth of a second, the response is complete. Your hand is yanked away from the heat. Your balance is restored after a stumble. No committee meetings, no deep reflection, just instant life-saving action. This evolutionary design exists because, in the game of survival, speed often trumps strategy. By the time your brain forms the conscious thought, "This is hot," the withdrawal reflex has already minimized the damage. These are the nervous system's fire drills, perfected over millions of years of biological trial and error. But the spinal cord isn't the only place where these shortcuts live. The brain stem manages its own set of critical, unthinking duties. The blink reflex that shields your eyes from a grain of dust, the gag reflex that prevents choking, and the vestibular reflexes that keep you upright when the ground tilts beneath you. These controls sit closer to the body's most vital functions: vision, breathing, and equilibrium, and they never wait for permission to act. However, do not mistake reflexes for rigid, unchangeable laws. Even these simple circuits are under the subtle influence of higher brain regions. The cortex and the cerebellum can fine-tune the sensitivity of a reflex, adjusting the gain of the system based on the situation. A surgeon, for instance, can train to suppress a startle reflex during a delicate operation, while an elite athlete can refine their reactions until intention and reflex blur into a single, fluid motion. This is the nervous system's clever compromise. Reflexes favor immediacy, while deliberate thought favors accuracy. The beauty of this delegation is that it frees up your consciousness to focus on the things that truly require it, like language, art, or the complexities of a relationship. It is far more efficient to let the lower circuits handle the maintenance of your survival, while the upper brain contemplates the meaning of existence. Every blink of your eye, every instinctive pull from a sharp object, and every micro-adjustment of your balance is an act of quiet, localized competence. These ancient loops remind us that intelligence is not limited to high-level thought. It is woven into the very fabric of our nerves, ensuring that even when we are distracted or dreaming, the machinery of life continues to protect us with selfless, lightning-fast precision. Try for a moment to imagine walking along the very edge of a narrow curb. You aren't running or flailing your arms. You are simply placing one foot meticulously in front of the other. As you move, a quiet, invisible choreography begins to unfold. Your ankles make micro-corrections so small they are nearly imperceptible. Your eyes flicker between the horizon and the ground, and every step lands with exactly the right amount of pressure to keep you upright. You are not consciously directing any of this. You aren't telling your left calf to contract by 3% or your right big toe to press harder. Yet, it happens with the fluid precision of a master dancer. The reason you don't tumble into the gutter is a remarkable structure tucked neatly at the back of your brain, the cerebellum. The name cerebellum is Latin for little brain, and while it accounts for only about 10% of the brain's total volume, it contains more than half of its neurons. It is a dense, deeply folded territory of tireless activity. While the cerebral cortex, the outer layer, handles the big picture strategy and the intention to move, The cerebellum is the master of execution. It ensures that timing, force, and coordination align so perfectly that you rarely even notice the effort involved. Without its constant supervision, even a task as mundane as pouring a glass of water would feel like trying to thread a needle during a violent earthquake. What truly sets the cerebellum apart is its obsession with the future. It doesn't just react to what is happening. It creates what scientists call a forward model. Every time your brain sends a command to your muscles, a carbon copy of that order is sent to the cerebellum. There, the little brain runs a high-speed simulation, predicting exactly what the sensory consequences of that movement should be, how your arm will feel as it moves, how the weight of a glass will shift in your palm, and how your balance will change. If the actual feedback from your senses doesn't match the cerebellum's prediction, it issues an immediate, silent correction. You could say the cerebellum is allergic to errors in movement. This predictive power allows you to act smoothly in a world full of delays. Signals from your eyes and limbs take a few milliseconds to reach your brain. If you waited for that feedback before adjusting, your movements would be jerky and late. The cerebellum solves this by staying one step ahead of reality, acting like a conductor who anticipates the next note before the orchestra even plays it. Like any great editor, the cerebellum learns through repetition. This is why learning to ride a bicycle or play the piano feels so clumsy at first. Your early attempts are full of prediction errors, which the cerebellum meticulously records as data for recalibration. Through practice, these internal models are polished until the skill becomes automatic. Once mastered, you no longer need to think about the movement. The cerebellum has taken the reins, allowing you to perform with effortless grace. Interestingly, we are discovering that the cerebellum's precision extends beyond the physical. It appears to provide the same timing and error checking for our thoughts and emotions. It helps us pace our speech, judge intervals of time, and even navigate social interactions, like knowing exactly when to nod or pause in a conversation. It is the unsung hero of elegance, the silent quality control department of the human experience. It doesn't clamor for attention. It simply stays in the background, refining the story of your life, one graceful step at a time. Imagine you are sitting in a quiet room and there is a faint clock ticking somewhere nearby. At first, you don't even notice it. You are preoccupied with your thoughts, the feeling of the chair beneath you, or the distant hum of traffic. But suddenly, your attention shifts. Your mind locks on to that rhythmic tick-tock, and in an instant, the rest of the world seems to recede. The city noise fades, the room narrows, and the only thing that truly exists is that tiny, patient sound. This effortless ability to filter out the chaos of the world and focus on a single thread of reality is one of the most astonishing feats of the human brain, and it begins in an egg-shaped structure deep at its center, the thalamus. The thalamus is the great gatekeeper of your senses, acting as the primary relay station for almost every piece of information entering your mind. Signals from your eyes, your ears, your skin, and your internal organs all arrive here first. They line up like millions of travelers at a grand central station, each hoping for permission to pass through to the higher regions of the brain. But the thalamus is an incredibly strict doorman. It knows that if the brain tried to process every single heartbeat, every flicker of light, and every whisper of air simultaneously, your consciousness would drown in a sea of static. To prevent this overwhelming noise, the thalamus filters, prioritizes, and forwards only what it deems relevant to the present moment. This isn't an act of carelessness. It is a vital necessity for survival. By choosing what to ignore, the thalamus creates the space for clarity. It works in constant dialogue with the frontal lobes to determine your budget of awareness. If you are searching for a friend in a crowded plaza, the thalamus will turn up the volume on facial recognition signals while dimming the sounds of irrelevant background chatter. This is the art of salience detection, the ability to notice what actually matters. However, the thalamus is more than just a filter. It is the regulator of the rhythm of your consciousness. During your waking hours, it maintains a steady flow of sensory traffic, keeping your perception sharp and your world dynamic. But as you begin to drift towards sleep, the gatekeeper begins to close its doors. The relay slows down, the flow of external information fades, and the cortex, the thinking part of your brain, effectively decouples from the outside world. This is why, in deep sleep, even loud noises may only register as distant, meaningless echoes. During the strange theatre of REM sleep, rapid eye movement, the thalamus switches its allegiance. Instead of forwarding signals from the external world, it begins to channel imagery and emotions generated from within the brain itself. This is why dreams can feel so incredibly vivid and immersive, even though your eyes are closed and your body is still. The gatekeeper hasn't stopped working. It has simply changed the guest list, allowing your internal world to take center stage. The thalamus also performs a unique role in synchronizing the brain. It can fire neurons in precise rhythmic patterns that pulse across distant regions of the cortex. This synchronization is what allows you to have a coherent experience, ensuring that the sight of a falling glass, the sound of it breaking, and the emotional jolt of the accident all happen in the same unified moment. Without this master timekeeper, your reality would be a fragmented mess of disconnected impressions. In every second of your life, the thalamus is holding the door just open enough for meaning to pass through, ensuring that you can focus, dream, and perceive the world with gentle order. Close your eyes for a moment and try to touch the tip of your nose. You can do it effortlessly without searching because your brain possesses a permanent living map of your entire body. It isn't a flat drawing on paper, it is a dynamic topography etched into the very surface of your cerebral cortex. The brain doesn't just inhabit your body, it contains a structural representation of it, stretching across two narrow mirrored strips of tissue that dictate how you feel and how you move. The first of these strips is the somatosensory cortex, which gathers every whisper of touch, temperature, and position from your skin and joints. The second, positioned just in front of it, is the motor cortex, the command center that issues the orders for your muscles to contract. But here is the fascinating twist. These internal maps are not drawn to scale. If you were to build a physical person based on the amount of brain space devoted to each body part, you would end up with a strange, distorted creature known as the homunculus, or the little man. This creature has enormous sensitive hands, comically large lips and tongue, but a tiny torso and spindly arms. Why the distortion? Because the brain is a pragmatist. It devotes its most valuable real estate to the areas that require the highest degree of precision and sensitivity. Your fingertips, which must distinguish the texture of silk from sandpaper, and your mouth, which must coordinate the complex dance of speech, are the VIPs of the cortical guest list. Your back and elbows, meanwhile, are relegated to the suburbs of the map, as they require far less data to function. But these maps are not written in stone. They possess a remarkable quality known as use-dependent plasticity. The more you utilize a specific part of your body for a skilled task, the more territory it claims in the brain. If you spend years practicing the violin, the area of your motor cortex dedicated to your left-hand fingers will physically expand, borrowing space from neighboring regions. The brain is a democratic landlord. The neurons that work the hardest get to rent the most space. Perhaps the most haunting evidence of these maps is the phenomenon of the phantom limb. When a person loses an arm or a leg, the physical limb is gone, but the cortical map remains. The neurons that once received signals from that hand are suddenly silent, but they haven't vanished. Sometimes they begin to respond to signals from neighboring areas, like the face. This is why an amputee might feel a ghostly touch on their missing hand when someone strokes their cheek. The brain's loyalty to its internal map is so strong that it prefers to hallucinate a limb rather than erase its representation. This internal cartography even extends to the tools we use. When you drive a car for a long time or play with a tennis racket, your brain begins to integrate those objects into its body map. To your neurons, the edge of the racket becomes the edge of your hand. This flexibility is what allows humans to be the ultimate tool users. Whether you are typing on a keyboard, performing surgery, or simply feeling the breeze on your skin, you are navigating the world through this invisible, ever-changing portrait of yourself. It is the blueprint that keeps your mind and body in constant, graceful alignment. Imagine you are sitting comfortably on your sofa, lost in thought, when you suddenly remember that your phone is charging in another room. Without any agonizing debate, you stand up, navigate the hallway, and reach for the device. To you, it felt like a single, fluid impulse. But deep within the shadows of your brain, a cluster of structures known as the basal ganglia has just performed a complex feat of diplomatic negotiation. They are the brain's action selectors, the silent arbiters sitting at the crossroads between your intentions and your actual physical movements. The basal ganglia function like a grand central terminal for your behavior. At any given moment, your mind is flooded with potential actions. You could stand up, you could stay seated, you could scratch your nose, or you could keep typing. Signals for all these possibilities flash constantly from the cortex, but only a few are granted the green light to proceed to the muscles. The basal ganglia manage this chaotic schedule through two primary neural pathways, the direct and the indirect routes. Think of the direct pathway as the go signal. It releases the brakes on a specific movement, allowing it to unfold. The indirect pathway is the hold signal. It suppresses competing impulses so they don't interfere with your chosen goal. Together, they transform a storm of conflicting urges into a single, purposeful act. The secret fuel behind this coordination is a remarkable molecule called dopamine. While often simplified as the pleasure chemical, dopamine is more accurately described as a teaching signal or the currency of motivation. When an action leads to a successful or rewarding outcome, a surge of dopamine reinforces the neural circuit that produced it. This is how habits are born. The first time you tried to ride a bike or type on a keyboard, your cerebral cortex had to work overtime, consciously managing every wobbling second. But as the basal ganglia refined the sequence through repetition and dopamine feedback, the task shifted from effortful thought to automatic routine. The train schedule was optimized, freeing your conscious mind to focus on more complex problems, while your basal ganglia handled the mechanics of the journey. This system is also responsible for weighing the cost of your decisions. If you are resting and think about getting a glass of water, your basal ganglia perform a rapid calculation. How much effort will this take versus how much do I need that drink? If the reward outweighs the effort, the go signal is triggered. This evaluation isn't about morality, it's about efficiency. It explains why habits, both good and bad, are so difficult to break. They aren't just memories. They are deeply carved grooves in your control system. Once the basal ganglia have automated a behavior to save energy, they are very reluctant to give up that efficiency. When this delicate scheduling system falters, the impact is profound. In conditions like Parkinson's disease, where dopamine-producing neurons begin to fade, the train station loses its signal system. The brain wants to move, but the go signal is weak, and the hold signal becomes an immovable barrier, leading to stiffness and hesitation. Conversely, if the green lights flash too freely, it can result in impulsive or repetitive behaviors. Your basal ganglia are the bridge between your desires and your discipline, the ancient managers of flow that allow you to move through the world with grace, ensuring that your life is defined by purposeful action rather than a cacophony of random impulses. Picture yourself standing on a moving city bus. One hand grips a polished metal pole while the other reaches for a bottle of water. The vehicle sways unexpectedly as it rounds a corner, the floor shifting beneath your feet. Yet, in this moment of instability, your arm moves with fluid precision. Your grip tightens just enough, and your balance adjusts without you ever dropping the bottle. To an observer, this looks like a simple, effortless act. But inside your brain, you have just executed one of the most complex symphonies in the known universe. The transformation of a silent will into physical reality. This journey begins with a spark of intention in the premotor cortex. This is where the brain acts as an architect, drafting the blueprint for a movement before a single muscle fiber twitches. It calculates the distance to the bottle, the speed of the bus, and the necessary tension in your shoulder. Once the plan is finalized, it is handed off to the primary motor cortex, a specialized ridge along the top of your brain that acts as the final command center. Here, neurons representing different parts of your body burst into a carefully timed cascade of electricity. It is not like pushing a single button. It is more like conducting an orchestra, where each instrument, each muscle group, must enter at the exact millisecond to create a seamless motion. From this command center, the signal plunges downward through a massive neural superhighway known as the corticospinal tract. This is a dense cable of nerve fibers that races from your cortex through the brainstem and into the spinal cord. These impulses travel at incredible speeds, hundreds of signals per second, to reach the motor neurons that directly wake up your muscles. But the brain does not trust this one pathway alone. It employs a supporting cast called the extrapyramidal system, which manages the background of your motion. As your arm reaches for the water, these secondary circuits are busy adjusting the muscles in your back and legs to counteract the shift in weight, ensuring you don't topple over while focused on your goal. The cerebellum also joins this internal dialogue, acting as a tireless editor. It constantly compares your intended movement with your actual movement. When the bus lurches, the cerebellum senses the mismatch and sends instant millisecond by millisecond corrections to your motor system to steady your hand. Even the brainstem serves as a vital bridge, capable of overriding higher commands with reflexive emergency corrections, like tightening your grip instinctively when the bus jolts, faster than conscious thought can even process the danger. The true beauty of this system lies in its graceful degradation. The brain has built so much redundancy into these motor pathways that it doesn't rely on any single point of failure. If one route is slightly damaged, others can often be recruited to compensate. This is why, with rehabilitation, the brain can remap its commands, finding new ways to reach the same goal. Every step you take, every word you speak, and every glass you lift is the result of this magnificent multi-layered relay. It is a conversation between the high-level dreamer and the low-level doer, transforming the intangible energy of a thought into the tangible grace of motion. As the sun begins to set and the long shadows of the evening stretch across your room, the world doesn't just change on the outside, it changes on the inside. The sharp, vibrant focus of your morning self begins to soften, giving way to a state of warmth and quiet reflection. This shift is not governed by electrical switches or sudden sparks, but by a rising tide of invisible molecules drifting through the landscape of your brain. These are the neuromodulators. Unlike the fast-acting neurotransmitters that carry a single yes or no signal from one neuron to another, neuromodulators set the overall climate of your mind. They are the lighting directors of your consciousness, deciding whether the stage of your life feels bright and energetic or dim and tranquil. One of the most powerful of these chemical conductors is dopamine. In the early hours of the day, dopamine levels rise to fuel your curiosity and drive. It is the molecule of anticipation, the mental engine that pushes you out of bed toward a goal, whether that's a cup of coffee or a career milestone. It doesn't provide pleasure itself so much as it teaches the brain what is worth your energy. But as the day progresses, other players take the stage. Serotonin acts as the quiet counterpart to dopamine's restless pursuit. It is the chemical of contentment and stability. When serotonin flows, the world feels manageable and safe. It is the restorative signal that allows you to feel a sense of well-being after a meal or a long walk, balancing the scales of your emotional life. While you are working or learning, another chemical called norepinephrine acts as your internal wake-up call. Released from a tiny cluster of neurons in the brainstem called the locus coeruleus, it sharpens your focus and alerts you to anything unexpected. It is the reason your mind clears in a flash when a car horn blares or your name is called in a crowded room. However, norepinephrine's intensity is balanced by acetylcholine, the brain's precision specialist. If norepinephrine tells you to pay attention, acetylcholine helps you decide where that attention should go. It is the master of memory and detail, the craftsman that helps you engrave new skills into your neural circuitry during a deep study session or a moment of intense concentration. Working quietly in the background is histamine, which most people associate with allergies, but which serves as a vital wake promoter in the brain. Produced in the hypothalamus, histamine keeps you alert and oriented to your surroundings during the day. When its levels naturally drop in the evening, sleepiness begins to arrive. This is why antihistamines used for allergies often make you drowsy. They are accidentally dimming the brain's internal lights. Together, these chemicals weave a complex, ever-changing tapestry of mood and state. They ensure that you aren't just a machine reacting to data, but a living being with a rich internal life that rises and falls with the rhythm of the sun. This chemical symphony is remarkably adaptive. In a moment of danger, norepinephrine floods the system to narrow your focus to survival. In a moment of creative flow, dopamine and acetylcholine work in tandem to pair curiosity with sustained concentration. And now, as you prepare for rest, these daytime molecules are receding, making way for GABA, the brain's primary inhibitory signal, and melatonin, which signals every cell in your body that the time for maintenance has arrived. You aren't simply a passenger in this chemical sea. You are the product of its balance. Every wave of energy, every dip into calm, and every flicker of focus is a gift from these invisible architects of your inner world, ensuring that the stage of your mind is always perfectly set for whatever comes next. Think of a street you haven't walked down in years. As you turn the corner, the air suddenly feels heavier, and an inexplicable sense of unease washes over you. Your pace slows, your heart rate quickens, and before you even consciously remember why, you find yourself wanting to take a different route. This is the street where you once had a frightening accident or received painful news. You haven't thought about it in a decade, but your body never forgot. This quiet, powerful decision to avoid the past is the work of the limbic system, the emotional command center that navigates your life not with logic, but with the profound language of feeling and value. At the core of this network sits the amygdala, two small almond-shaped clusters that act as the sentinels of your survival. They don't wait for the slow, analytical, thinking brain to process data. They are designed for speed. The amygdala scans every sight and sound for emotional relevance, sounding a silent alarm the moment it detects a hint of threat or reward. It is the reason you flinch before you know why. But the amygdala doesn't work alone. It is tethered to the hippocampus, the brain's master archivist. While the amygdala remembers how an event felt, the hippocampus remembers the context, the who, where, and when. Together, they ensure that your history isn't just a list of facts, but a living map of meaning that guides your every choice. This emotional intelligence is further refined by the cingulate cortex, which acts as a bridge between your feelings and your actions. It helps you weigh the emotional cost of a decision, mediating the tension between a sudden impulse and long-term restraint. When these structures are in harmony, your life has a sense of purpose and direction. You aren't just a machine moving through space. You are a narrative in motion. You approach what brings joy and avoid what brings harm, not through cold calculation, but through an intuitive gut feeling provided by millions of years of evolutionary experience. However, even this ancient captain needs a navigator. This is where the prefrontal cortex, the thoughtful executive at the very front of your brain, comes into play. Its job is to regulate and reappraise the storms of emotion that rise from below. When the amygdala overreacts to a perceived slight, the prefrontal cortex provides the perspective needed to stay calm. This partnership is the foundation of emotional intelligence. It allows you to feel deeply while acting wisely. And even when control falters, when we experience an amygdala hijack and act too quickly, the brain's capacity for neuroplasticity ensures that we can learn from the mistake. We can rewrite the emotional tags on our memories, transforming a place of fear into a place of wisdom. If you feel your eyelids growing heavy, allow the grand story of life on Earth to wrap around you gently and guide you into calm. Don't forget to subscribe to listen to more of our bedtime stories. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and slowly drift into sleep, into silence, into the boundless, timeless current where all life intertwines. Wishing you a quiet, comforting night.